Grizzly bears are iconic symbols of the North American wild. These are the lands of the grizzly bear. The tundra and the boreal forest of the Yukon, the temperate rainforest of British Columbia, the Rocky Mountains and the foothills of Alberta, and the sagebrush grasslands of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Grizzly bears are a keystone species that defines these landscapes. But these lands are threatened. Human activities and industrial development threaten grizzly bear habitat. Grizzly bears feel the impact of a changing climate and declining food sources like salmon and whitebark pine. We are fighting for their survival. Join us. Be a voice for the grizzly bear. Through research, indigenous knowledge, public education, and advocacy, we work to ensure the majestic grizzly bear and the lands they roam are protected for generations to come. This is the Grizzly Bear Foundation.
Wonderful. Welcome to Give for Grizzlies. It's great to be here with you this evening. Very soon, I hope we can all be together in person. But for now, we are finding creative ways to stay engaged with supporters like you. And thank you for joining our Zoom event tonight. Grizzly bears have emerged from hibernation, and many of BC bear viewing operations are once again open for business. I'll be going up bear viewing next week, and I encourage you to support Commercial Bear Viewing Association and Indigenous operators. Get out into the wild and see grizzly bears up close yourself and support our ecotourism economy. Nice to see there's some new names and some names from last time rolling in too. Great, wonderful. Thanks for everyone for being here. I'm Nicholas Scapilotti, and I'm the Executive Director of the Grizzly Bear Foundation. I'll be your host this evening. I'm at home, like you. It's pretty casual tonight, so please be patient with our technical ability. Sit back with your drink, some popcorn, and enjoy. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territory of the First Nations whose land we are all fortunate enough to be upon this evening. Here in Vancouver, we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. To start this evening, I'd like to introduce Alec Dan from Musqueam to welcome us to his traditional territory. I am grateful to live and work in this beautiful place. And here's our welcome from Alec Dan.
It's an honor for me to be here with you today to welcome you here to the unceded territory of the Musqueam people and descendants of Musqueam ancestors, our friends and relatives from Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh. Welcome you here, what is known as the Greater Vancouver area. That's the unceded territory. At one time, we used to have at least 30 villages as far as Coquitlam, Surrey, Delta, west of those areas. It was all considered Musqueam land. That's why I say it's such an honor for me to be here with you today, because I'm not only speaking on behalf of myself, representing myself, I'm here on behalf of my people, my community, my family, also our friends and relatives once again. That's why I say it's such an honor, because when we hear visitors coming into our territory, we used to come from those 30 villages, meet and greet our visitors at the mouth of the river, get ready to welcome them. To go along with these words of welcome, have a welcome song, the Musqueam welcome songs. And the words translate to welcome respected ones, welcome loved ones. So with these words of welcome, share this welcome song also. With So once again, on behalf of the Musqueam people, descendants of Musqueam ancestors, welcome you here to the unceded territory, and also welcome you to your conference, and start your conference off in a wonderful, good way. Thank you for asking me to be here with you today. Such an honor for me to be the voice for my people at this time. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Alec. I'm so excited that we're all here with you tonight, but I'm not the only one here. We have a whole team behind the scenes working to make Give for Grizzlies possible. And we are here tonight together to celebrate the grizzly bear, provide an update on our work that we've been doing, and raise funds for grizzly bear conservation and welfare. Give for Grizzlies should run about an hour. And if you have any questions as we go along, you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom window, and we'll try and put the response or all answer in the chat. The chat feature will also provide links to things that we're talking about, things that we mentioned, facts and things like that as well. So keep an eye on that and have that open. Tonight, we're going to hear from a few very special guests. We're going to see beautiful videos of grizzlies in the wild. We're going to hear more about the work we are doing for the grizzly bear. And right here, you'll hear all about how you can support by making a donation tonight. There'll be one break about halfway through the evening, so you can grab a drink, take a break, and please make a donation. To begin, I'd like to introduce our first guest. And our mission here is at the Grizzly Bear Foundation is to work collaboratively through science, indigenous knowledge, and education for the long-term welfare of grizzly bears across North America. Now, to get things started, we have a new project that I'm really excited about talking to you about tonight. It's in partnership with the Exposed Wildlife Conservancy, and it's about protecting grizzly bears in Alberta. Our first guest can't be with us tonight, because she's out camping in the wild, which is wonderful. But earlier this week, I caught up with Sarah Elmaligi, a biologist, author, and board member of the Exposed Wildlife Conservancy. And here's a little recording of our conversation from earlier this week.
I've been working with grizzly bears for around 12 or 13 years. And it started with my master's work, which took place in the Cootsamatine, north of Prince Rupert on the BC coast. And I also did my PhD in Banff, Kootenay, and Yoho National Parks here in Alberta and BC. And my research really focuses on how grizzly bears and people share the landscape. So how grizzly bears use habitat around recreationists, and how recreationists perceive their impact and also their expectations of management when it comes to bears in protected areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're excited to be working with you and the Exposed Wildlife Conservancy and expanding our work into Alberta. It's really great to be partnering with you. And today, just to talk a little bit about the situation in Alberta and what's happening. There was a recent press release from the Alberta government. I'll just kind of read the intro here and then get your thoughts. But March 31st of this year, and they were a little bit cheeky with the title, positive news about Alberta grizzly bear populations, and basically saying that there's some good news. For the first time, Alberta has science-based population estimates for all provincial bear management units, and no other jurisdiction in the world has undertaken or achieved grizzly bear population inventory work at this scale, which is pretty impressive. Two recent grizzly bear population surveys by FRI Research, led by Gordon Stenhouse, a well-known grizzly bear biologist in Alberta, with support of Alberta Environment Parks, Alberta Forest Products Association, has found that grizzly bear populations have doubled in the foothills area of Banff National Park. And so that's some pretty exciting news. Can you tell us more about this study and kind of what was involved in undertaking something like this?
Yeah, so I mean, this is really great news for Alberta's grizzly bear population. Just over 10 years ago, the grizzly bear population was listed as threatened in Alberta. And so because of that, there was a recovery plan that was drafted, and many men and women were challenged with the task of contributing to grizzly bear recovery. And this includes people who work for government as wildlife biologists, but also many landowners and various nonprofits working on human grizzly bear coexistence initiatives. And so this really is a story of success. I think one of the things that's important to remember is that when we define the need to recover a species, that inherently means that we are looking to have more of that species on the landscape. Because we now have more grizzly bears in Alberta, that means that our efforts are working. We are recovering the population. It doesn't mean that the population is recovered. In fact, one of the significant gaps in the grizzly bear recovery plan is that we haven't actually defined what recovery means. Yeah. According to the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, any species that has less than 1,000 reproducing individuals is considered threatened. So we now have over 900 grizzly bears in Alberta, but not all of those grizzly bears are reproducing individuals. Many of those grizzly bears will be subadults.
That's cubs of the year, that's young, and a lot of them stay with their moms for like 3 years. There's one of the slowest reproducing mammals on the planet, right?
Yeah, and grizzly bears don't really become sexually active or mature until they're about 6 years old on average. Wow. So any bear younger than 6 is not considered part of this reproducing individuals population that would contribute to that 1,000 individuals for the threshold for the status to be changed from threatened to something else, as per IUCN definitions.
Right. So we're pretty far from actual recovery. Like, these are good signs, but there's still a lot of work to do to actually get them to a place where we could say that, grizzly bears are recovered in Alberta.
Yeah, part of the challenge that we have actually is that we don't have a definition of recovery aside from that IUCN definition. So we do have a grizzly bear recovery plan, but it does not define what recovered means in terms of the number of grizzly bears on the landscape.
Originally, grizzly bears were listed as threatened in Alberta since 2010. And at the time, the provincial population was around 700 to 800 bears. And these new estimates bring it up to about 865 to 973. But really, we need to look at the details of what that means. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that to help people understand what those numbers mean.
Sure. I mean, the first thing I think that's important to understand is that we never actually know exactly how many grizzly bears are on the landscape. So this population estimate has been generated by a very thorough effort collecting DNA samples across Alberta, which is then used through a scientific analysis to estimate how many grizzly bears are in a particular bear management area or management unit. What's great about the work that's happened here in Alberta is that we have actually conducted this DNA sampling for every single bear management area across the province. And some of those management areas we did work in the early 2000s. And so we can actually look at the population trend over time from like 2004 until 2018 or 14 or whenever the most recent sampling was done.
Right.
So for some populations, we have a trend, and for others, we just have new information that is actually based on data instead of expert opinion.
Right. So this is really, a really important part. Like we talk about habitat, we talk about food security. People are, worried about what's happening with the salmon population or the whitebark pine population in the alpine. But a big part of this is about coexisting, living with grizzly bears, understanding their behavior and appreciating how we can, live together with wildlife like grizzly bears. And I heard you just wrote a wonderful new book that talks about this, and it's in partnership with wildlife photographer John Marriott, who's going to be on later in the show. But do you have a copy of your book? And maybe you can tell us a little bit about how this plays. Yeah. So
here's the book. It's called What Bears Teach Us, and it's published by Rocky Mountain Books. And it is an amazing partnership between John and I, where I wrote the words and John took amazing photos of bears. And
Beautiful.
Part of the reason why we wanted to do this book was to help people understand the complexity of bear behavior. Bears aren't just running around on the landscape trying to get us for whatever reason. And bear behavior is actually quite complex. And a lot of that complexity stems from personalities and individual character traits and histories and historical relationships with people. And so John and I wanted to create a book that kind of helped people to understand bears from a new light. And I called it What Bears Teach Us because I have learned many, many things about myself and about my relationship with the landscape and bears and Mother Earth, just from working with bears and watching how they interact with each other and people on the land. And so, like, for example, the first chapter is called Patience and Tolerance. And you would never think of describing a bear as patient. But every time I see a bear jam where you have a bear grazing dandelions in the ditch surrounded by 100 cars and people getting out of their vehicles to take a bear selfie, all I can think is, wow, I would make a bad bear. Like, I would not be able to handle that many people watching me eat lunch.
Yeah.
So I think bears are incredibly patient, and it's sort of things like that that I've observed over the years that made me want to partner with John to visually show how bears display these different behaviors, because his photos are so amazing, but also to share some of the recent science about bear behavior so that people can get an understanding of how bears are making decisions every day to navigate a landscape that has become increasingly busy with people.
We're going to put the link up so that people can figure out how to get a copy of the book. We'll put that up in the program. And we really appreciate your time. It's great to talk with you today about grizzly bears.
Thanks so much for having me. I hope the webinar is a great success.
Thanks, Sarah. Have a good time in the wild.
Thank you. I will.
Grizzly bear populations have grown significantly over the past 13 years, doubling in some places in Alberta. Population estimates based on DNA analysis now show between 850 and nearly 975 grizzly bears call our province home. Now the province will take a look at whether the bears will continue to be treated as a threatened species. Bill McFarland reports.
At first, the dramatic increase in grizzly bear population appears promising for the threatened species, but biologists say there's evidence the landscape could hold a lot more.
I mean, when we see animals hit, their kind of max on the landscape, usually you see that growth really slow.
So far, that's not what appears to be happening. They're expanding out of the foothills and towards the prairie they once called home.
Population has moved further eastward, and the more bears that are showing up to the east are females. So that's important from a management standpoint as well.
Close encounters have been common in the mountain parks for years, but over the past decade, Fish and Wildlife officers have responded to a sharp increase in grizzlies right up to Calgary city limits.
I don't think it's going to be about carrying capacity of the landscape. What it's really going to be about is social carrying capacity.
If they continue to expand in numbers and territory, at some point they will be considered a recovered species and their protected status removed, and that could open an opportunity to hunt the big bears.
It is, frankly, the primary management tool used for most species on the landscape. Whether or not that's something that we need to, Albertans will accept as a management tool in this case is a conversation that needs to continue.
Environmental groups worry that the 2005 suspension to the hunting season could be lifted. That year, 10 grizzlies were shot.
There's all kinds of species that we don't hunt, and wildlife management has to come into the 21st century. It has to be based on science. It has to be based on the values of the people.
Most believe there's room for both people and bears, and any decisions will have to balance two different perspectives.
You don't want sort of the more urban viewscape to sort of steamroll those rural perspectives, who really are the people that have to deal with the reality of having grizzly bears on the landscape.
Bill McFarland, CTV News, Calgary.
Well, that's great. So we've had our ear to the ground on these developments since early or late last year, thanks to renowned wildlife photographer, Exposed Wildlife Conservancy and Grizzly Bear Foundation board member John Marriott. And he's going to be joining us any second. He'll be just chiming in. And over the past, there he is. Hey, John.
Hey, Nicholas. How's it going? Hi, everybody.
Good evening. So yeah, John, thanks for joining us. And, over the last few months, thanks to you, we've been keeping an eye on this issue. And together, we've built this partnership with the Exposed Wildlife Conservancy and the Grizzly Bear Foundation team. And we've been working on this short documentary that you've been filming for much longer than that and putting this story together. And we're just really happy to be a part of it, about the fate of grizzly bears in Alberta. And tonight we're going to chat a little bit about it. And for the first time, our audience is going to get a sneak peek teaser that we'll share with you in a moment. But let's chat a little bit first. So how did you first hear about this concern about, and the need to create this documentary? What drove that?
Came on my radar back in September when a friend emailed me with a copy of the Legislative Hansard, which is basically a copy of what is said in the legislature. And it was from July 2020, so just about a year ago now. And when I got that email in September, I went and read what the person told me to go check out. And it was Minister Nixon making several statements and using rhetoric that made me instantly think that, oh, geez, they're going to be considering opening a hunt again when the study results come out that Gordon Stenhouse, who you just saw in that CTV News interview, that little segment there, when his data came out, that population data, the comments from Minister Nixon in the legislature made me think, okay, geez, something's going on here. So I contacted Sarah right away, and Sarah and I had a chat, and we decided, geez, we better start thinking about doing something about this, and then talk to my fellow board members with the Exposed Wildlife Conservancy, and we started getting the ball rolling and started thinking, okay, we've got to prepare for what might happen if they decide to bring a hunt back. And that kind of started steamrolling, contacted you guys end of 2020 and then into 2021, formalized our partnership a couple months ago. and we're now deep in the throes of putting the documentary together. We've already done a fundraiser, a little crowdfunding to get some money to help out with that, and partnership with you guys has been fantastic for that. And so we're right now looking at about a 30 to 35 minute documentary. So it's turned out to be quite a bit longer than we had originally thought it was going to be. That said, we've gotten so much fantastic material from all the interviews and stuff that we may even do more than that. We will see after this one comes out. This one's going to talk primarily about the possibility of the hunt returning, talk about the population statistics and how that was all determined, how Gordon Stenhouse and the FRI research team got all of the population data. It's quite an interesting story how they actually achieve that data and then use it and scientifically analyze it. So there's going to be a lot of cool stuff in the documentary, a lot of great footage, and then we're going to talk about what the steps are next moving forward. And Sarah hinted at some of that just in her interview with you there. You know, we want the grizzly bear recovery plan to, you know, species is not recovered right now. It's, you know, it's recovering. And that is a very key thing. So in the documentary, we'll talk about what does recovered mean? What should we be looking at, including in the grizzly bear recovery plan that's not in there right now? And, you know, should we really be looking at removing the threatened status of the bear right now? So we'll see what this review that they're undergoing right now with the government, what it comes up with. But we're certainly hoping that they do not remove that threatened status.
Right. So like when they ended the hunt is one of the easiest things and that we can control with, you know, human wildlife conflict, right?
It's really the only thing we have complete control over.
Yeah, so that's true. The others are more challenging, and you know, there's coexistence, rail strikes, the roads, industrial development. And, you know, people who know you and follow you on Instagram, you are in the wild all the time in Western Canada. It's wonderful. You take beautiful photographs, but you're out there. And what do you see, what's happening with the landscape? What do you see that the challenges that these grizzlies face?
Yeah, I see a lot of stuff. I mean, I was out this morning. I was telling the panelists, I joined in a little early before the webinar got going here and told everybody, so how's everyone's day? I saw 5 grizzlies and 2 black bears myself this morning, and so nice. I was obviously just rubbing it in a little bit, but I did. You know, I was out there this morning, getting some more photos, some more footage for this documentary. Had a couple of really great experiences. I've been out a ton this spring, and of course, just in general over the last 30 years in Alberta. And you know what I see in the landscape is a tremendous fragmentation, and you know we're really at a very delicate ecological balance right now. You know, we've got grizzly bears coming back into certain areas, but it would not take much to tip the balance and to go the other way. We've got such a huge road density in Alberta, not unlike British Columbia, you know, kind of the total opposite of a place like the Yukon. In Alberta, you know, some of the areas right near me here have a road density greater than 0.6 roads per square kilometer, which if you actually think about that for a second is staggering. It means, you know, basically every kilometer you go into the bush, you're encountering a road, 0.6 roads every time you walk a kilometer. So, you know, that's a lot of roads out there that are fragmenting up habitat. And as we know, grizzly bears are keystone species, they're umbrella species, they're indicator species, they're all these key things that are so critical to a healthy ecosystem. And so if we can figure out how to coexist with them and how to protect all that habitat and continue getting bears recovering in Alberta, and you know we've already had the hunt stop in BC, then we're really looking at moving forward with creating something that I think future generations are going to be really proud of us for, and that is protecting and keeping intact, healthy grizzly populations out there in the wild, which in turn is protecting everything else underneath them.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, that's one of the things that, you know, people want to know. Like, there's obviously great support for grizzly bears in Alberta. It's one of the reasons that, you know, a hunt was ended years ago. There was great support here in British Columbia. That's why it was ended, so that we can focus on these issues. With the new announcement, it's a good time for us to come together, get the word out through this documentary, which is wonderful. But also, we're going to be starting a campaign together. And so people who are watching tonight, can sign on to our newsletter. And over the next few months, Grizzly Bear Foundation and Expose will be launching a campaign to help you get the word out to the Alberta government to show how much you care for grizzly bears. And this isn't just people in Alberta. We need people across Canada, across the world, whoever's watching, but especially Albertans to sign up, and we're going to have a great campaign launching. The other thing we could talk about, because we've been working on this, but just a sneak peek, we won't talk about it too much, but down the road, we'll also be working on a similar documentary about what's happening in the Yukon, which you and I have been fortunate enough to spend some time up there. And just wanted to mention that to people, but maybe you can just quickly talk about why you love the Yukon and why you feel it's important for us to talk about what's happening up there with grizzly bears.
Yeah, the Yukon is kind of the exact opposite of much of British Columbia and Alberta, in the sense that, you know, there's 30,000 people living in the whole territory, and yet it's almost the size of Alberta. So, you know, in Alberta, we've got 4 million people. So it's that roadless, spectacular wilderness, and you've really got just a couple of main roads or highways going through. And you and I have driven on them and been lucky enough to go to a few different places. I've been up to the Yukon a dozen times now, and spent months and months up there. And fantastic population of grizzly bears. They're mountain grizzlies by and large, but there's also tundra grizzlies up there. So some unique barren ground grizzlies. And it is just a spectacular place that I think takes you back in time. You know, I go to the Yukon and immediately I start thinking about, geez, you know, this is not much changed from when they went and did the gold rush back in the late 1800s. In fact, there's fewer people now than there were then in 1897 and 1898. And that's pretty amazing to think about. So the concern up there, of course, is that grizzly bears are still hunted. There's a thriving guide outfitter business going on with them. And there is not much bear viewing going on, yet the opportunities are enormous for an ecotourism industry up there that would just absolutely dwarf what the trophy hunting industry can do.
And we've seen that in British Columbia. You know, ecotourism brings in far more money. And also they've got a lot of coexistence issues. They're, you know, challenged with mortalities from that as well. And there's a lot of people that care about grizzlies in the Yukon. That was the thing that I loved about being in the Yukon. Very different Yukoners. I love working with them. They're so passionate about nature. And I'm really excited to do that work with you. So just everyone, a little sneak peek that, you know, Grizzly Bear Foundation and Exposed will be doing work down the road. But now, to give everybody a sneak peek on your documentary, I think we're going to set that up. And thanks for your time, John. And we're going to roll the sneak peek.
Thanks, Nicholas.
I think a lot of people who live in Alberta and Western Canada and North America have a relationship with grizzly bears.
The grizzly bear, the great bear, there's something with a reconnection with the land that doesn't come from other things.
And grizzly bears represent what I see as Canada and the wilderness.
We're at a crossroads here now, and we have to change. It's time. We have to change.
It's about people. The idea that, you know, that we're just going to have them in the national parks, I think would be a mistake. You just can't keep taking and taking and taking.
I really do see bears as teachers. They create possibilities for us to be connected to nature in ways that we couldn't be were they not there.
Wonderful. So that'll be coming out early next month. And just follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter to find out for updates and find out when the documentary launches. So now we're going to take a short break. But before we do, I'd like to talk to you about something very important. Tonight, we need your help. We need your support to protect grizzly bears, to address the political threats that they face, to do the field research needed to further conservation, to engage communities in coexistence, to protect their habitat and food sources like salmon and whitebark pine, Well, grizzlies capture our hearts and our imaginations. They are in our stories and our myths. They are an iconic symbol of the wild, but they need our help and they need allies like you. And tonight we're asking you to give for grizzlies. And we are excited to announce, to make your generosity even more impactful, thanks to a match from the Adane Foundation, your impact will be doubled because every dollar you give for Grizzly Bear Foundation tonight will be matched by the Adane Foundation up to $80,000. It's very generous, and I hope that you'll be generous tonight and help us fulfill this match. It's wonderful. So if you go to our website and the comment section, you can make a donation on our website, and in the comment section, write, please match my gift, and the Adane Foundation will match that tonight and tomorrow as well. It's going to be on for a little while, so if you don't make it tonight, you can make it tomorrow as well. So now we're going to take a short break for a few moments, and you can make a donation. You can check out our store. The links are in the chat, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back. I hope you're enjoying your Give for Grizzlies. Don't forget that you can use the Q&A in the bottom corner. And by the way, you make a donation by check. You can find the address in the chat as well, or on our website. Thank you so much for donating. I've been getting updates from the team, and the donations are rolling in. I'm always inspired by the generosity of others. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and we're putting it to good work. I always like to say we have a small team here at the Grizzly Bear Foundation, but we're punching above our weight and working hard for every dollar that you donate and putting it to good use for grizzly bears. I have another exciting announcement for you tonight. For those that enjoy podcasts, we're bringing back GrizzCast this summer. So after a brief hiatus during the pandemic, we have some exciting new stories to share with you from people on the front lines of grizzly bear conservation. And for those that don't know about GrizzCast, we're going to play a short audio trailer to give you a sense of what you can expect.
From the Grizzly Bear Foundation, this is GrizzCast. I'm Nicholas Scapilotti, the Executive Director of the Grizzly Bear Foundation. Every month in our new podcast, I'll explore how the fates of humans, grizzly bears, and the natural world are all connected.
I was responsible for a lot of grizzly bear deaths. I feel that I owe them. I'm really trying hard to pay that debt back. And also out of respect to the animal, being so intelligent and so able to understand what coexistence is with me.
That's one of the things I like, telling stories of different walks of life and how people found their role in conservation. You know, it's the issue of our age, how we're going to deal with climate change, how we're going to address the rapid loss of species. These stories talk about those challenges, but then also talk about how rewarding it is.
Bears have an incredible sense of humor. They are extraordinarily fun-loving.
We are in one of the longest battles in history to save an iconic symbol of the North American wilderness, the grizzly bear.
I strongly feel that collaboration is absolutely necessary. Often, human-wildlife conflict is not conflict between humans and wildlife. It's conflict between humans about wildlife.
The stories we tell about the natural world often start with an adventure. Featured in our first episode, we'll hear from Doug Peacock, a legend when it comes to grizzly bear conservation. But even legends can have humble beginnings.
But when I got to the top of the tree, I discovered it wasn't much bigger than a Christmas tree. and I'm up on the top, naked, and it's cold. The wind is blowing. It's October. Those bears, they never looked at me. They were just enjoying my demise, bleeding blue and naked, like some species of sparrow on the top of the little tiny tree.
The environment shapes our identity, where we come from, who we are, and who we will become.
We're part of nature. We're not above it. We're not separate from it. We are part of it. Sometimes we are the alpha top dog, and sometimes we're just another link on the food chain.
Join me on a journey to re-envision what it means to be a conservationist, stirring our imagination for how we can all make space for the wild in our lives. Learn more at grizzcast.grizzlybearfoundation.com.
Well, there's lots of places that you can listen to Grizzcast, and we're excited to share new episodes with you starting at the end of this month. We have lots of exciting things to talk about tonight, and one of them is about our orphan grizzly bear rewilding research that addresses one of the greatest threats to grizzly bears, human-caused deaths. As our communities and resource activities stretch further and farther into the wild and the climate crisis disrupts food sources, grizzly bear encounters become more common, with too many ending tragically for the bears. Surprise encounters with mother grizzlies in the backcountry, collisions with trains and vehicles, coexistence issues in our backyards with unsecured attractants, too often lead to grizzly bears being killed in accidents or lethally removed by a conservation officer to protect property or to ensure the safety of humans, situations that could have been prevented. When a grizzly bear mother is killed, her cubs are either lethally removed, sent to a zoo, or abandoned with little chance of survival on their own. Thus, the loss of a grizzly bear is both a welfare issue as well as an ecological issue. Rewilding them gives them a second chance at life in the wild and returns a keystone species to these ecosystems. Our orphan grizzly bear rewilding research is critical for improving our understanding of the effectiveness of rewilding. Right now, wildlife officials in Alberta and Montana, who I've spoken to, are watching closely, anticipating our findings. They're under a lot of pressure to deal with their orphan cubs in ways that are more humane and that keep them on the land in the wild, which is going to influence, our work is going to influence wildlife policy for the lives of grizzlies across North America. This innovative work will contribute to the scientific understanding of rewilding, also the captive rearing, and how they're brought to a stage where we can develop best practices to ensure the survivability of these orphan cubs once they're in the wild. We're really fortunate enough to work with independent researcher, Dr. Lana Traniello, and we're going to hear from Lana shortly. She's going to be joining us. We're also partnering with the BC provincial government and Northern Lights Wildlife Society. Together, they've been running this program for over a decade. And Northern Lights is the only wildlife shelter in North America that rescues and cares for grizzly bears. And so later on, when Lana joins us, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So before we start, I'd like to talk a little bit about our role, which is our role to bring science to this conversation. When we last spoke in December, during the pandemic of last year, there were 5 grizzly cubs of the year, just under a year old, and they were in the care of Northern Lights Wildlife Shelter in Spillers. Tragically, these cubs were orphaned last autumn near Bella Coola in British Columbia. And the 5 cubs were rescued and taken to the shelter where they've been cared for and given a chance to mature over the past 6 months. Earlier this month, these 5 young orphan grizzly bears started their long journey back to the wild. And Lana will be joining us in a moment to tell us all about that journey and her research. There's so much hope and promise with this work. We're so excited to be part of it, but it also comes with significant challenges. I'm sad to report that during the final stage of the release, there were complications during the helicopter transportation, and one of the bears, Mewen, did not survive the journey. The provincial veterinarian, who is part of the team and on-site, will be conducting a necropsy, and this will take some time to complete the analysis of this tragic event. One of the goals of our research is to examine every step of the rewilding process, from their intake by the Conservation Officer Service through their care at Northern Lights Wildlife Shelter, their final release in partnership with the provincial government and all the professionals that put so much care into giving these cubs a second chance at life in the wild. Through all of this, we are learning and building best practices, thus ensuring that we determine better care for grizzlies everywhere across North America. The other 4 bears have, to everyone's joy, have settled into their new home. All the bears are wearing radio transmitter collars, and we're monitoring them closely. They choose their new landscape and are doing exactly what we would expect a young grizzly to do in the wild, eating the foods, exploring, and demonstrating their natural instinctive ability to adapt to life in the wild. To tell us more about this vital work, and will be Dr. Lana Traniello, who will be joining us any moment. We'll just see if she'll be signing in. Hi, Lana. Yeah, we still got you on mute there. If you can click your mute button. There we go. How are you today?
Am I working now? I'm well. How are you, Nicholas?
Great. So where are you today, Lana?
I am in my office in Campbell River, British Columbia.
Nice. And are you recovered from your big trip? I know that it was quite the adventure.
It was quite the adventure. Yeah, it was. And I'm recovering from it. Yeah.
That's good. We're so proud to be working with you. And for those who don't know you, man, why don't you tell us a little bit about, who you are and why you work with Grizzlies?
Okay, my name is Lana Traniello. I am an independent research scientist. I am also co-chair for the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature's Bear Specialist Group's Human Bear Conflict Expert Team. And I am a member of the IUCN North American Bear Expert Team, and I'm a registered professional biologist. So I did a master's under Steve Herrero with black bears and a PhD under Mark Boyce's supervision with grizzly bears.
And where did you go to school?
So I did my undergrad at the University of Victoria, my master's at the University of Calgary, and my PhD at the University of Alberta in biological sciences.
Very cool. We're really excited to be working with you. You bring so much credibility and to our program, to the care for the grizzlies. And tonight, I'd just like to talk a little bit about that. I've talked a little bit about the specifics of the research, but perhaps you can tell us why you are specifically interested and why you think this is important for grizzly bears, but also for brown bear conservation worldwide.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to talk about that. Rewilding is really important because, as we can see and we saw in your videos, we are not, unfortunately, creating a lot of habitat. We, as humans, are taking up a lot of habitat. And what that's doing worldwide is sort of shrinking our bear populations into these islands. So if you really look in Europe and throughout Eurasia, so the grizzly bear of our 8 bear species, it's the most widely distributed globally. So the European brown bear is related to our North American grizzly bear. They're all sort of one.
And the Russian
so what we
brown
can
bear
see,
too, right?
That's right. Yeah. And what we see is these really shrinking populations. And there's some of these areas where rewilding or having orphan bears is sort of what has to be used. They need to keep these individuals alive, to keep that genetic diversity, to keep their populations going, right? And so it's a question really on a global scale, I find, in working with the IUCN and the Human Bear Conflict Expert Team. So in that role, I work with 7 of the 8 bear species worldwide. Polar bears are considered marine mammals and have their own expert team, but the other 7 I'll work with. And we're seeing rewilding happening with a number of species. And here in Canada, and in British Columbia in particular, we sort of have the ability to look at this question and to really examine it. What are best practices? How can we learn from things like Mewin? You brought up Mewin's death. Well, that is so unfortunate and tragic, but boy, there's a lot we've already learned from that, and we're putting out globally already. Here's what we've learned. Don't, do these things in this transport.
It'll be a big part
on the helicopter. So,
right, a big part of
yeah,
your
it's a big
research
part.
will be putting best practices from what you're observing on everything from how the conservation officers first handled these orphan bears, the way the government is involved, Northern Lights, how the First Nation, the Newhawk Nation helped us select this spot, you're examining it all. And at the end, we'll, hopefully have a wonderful document that will help people who work with grizzly bears around the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's the goal of this research.
Yeah. So, Lana, it's our mission here at the Grizzly Bear Foundation to further research into conservation and welfare of grizzly bears. And many people ask me, like, why are you undertaking this research specifically? Like, why are you studying the rearing, release, and rewilding of cubs? And I'm wondering, what would you say to that?
Well, I guess I'd give two answers to that. The answer from the emotional realm is why are you, what did these cubs do to deserve to die? So they're, and a lot of people say, well, these are just problem bears, and that's not true. So if we look at the background of these two family groups that we had in, so we had a family of 3 bears, triplets, and then we had Cedar and Mew in the second family there. Okay, well, the first family, Arthur and Isa and Raven, their mother was just fishing along a well-known fishing spot, and there was entrails and all sorts of things that were left from humans that, and then people approaching her to take pictures and releasing dogs on her, and she's trying to defend her babies. So now an interaction happens and she loses her life, and these 3 cubs are supposed to be shot. Like that's the option.
Yeah.
Because there's no rewilding facility. So there's an emotional thing there. And then my second part of it is what I answered earlier. There's a conservation question that's a lot larger than us, because we're not making habitat for these animals, and they need a lot of space. So we can do that. We can learn about that, and we can put those best practices out there and say, hey, here's how to do it. And so I think it spans a really nice picture.
Yeah, and it's very innovative work. It's very challenging work, and it's not being done anywhere else. And Alberta, we've spoken to wildlife officials in Alberta and Montana. They're under great pressure to handle orphan cubs differently, handle those situations differently. So this is really important research that is going to help grizzlies everywhere. I guess one of the other questions I had for you is, to do this work is, it's science. You're you're at home, you're on the computer tracking GPS, you're writing research reports, and but a couple times a year there's this adventure where you have to work to get these cubs from the rewilding center in Smithers all the way to their home in the wild. And you recently did that earlier this month. Maybe you can tell us about how intense of an experience that is, and what's that like?
It's a super intensive experience, and it takes an incredible team of people to do this. And I'm just so happy to say that we have that team. So you've got the wonderful individuals at the Northern Wildlife Shelter who are taking care of these bears and who are making sure that they do not have human access past their caregivers, right? So that's a huge important step of this. Then you have our wonderful provincial vet and our retired provincial vet, both of them coming up to help out for this immobilization of these animals and assure that that's safe. And then we have the processing, which is on my end, that I take over in my team, and a government helping, and Taylor helping on that from the Grizzly Bear Foundation.
That was just a great slide there. Maybe if we could go back to it, but this is pretty impressive. The team this year was all women.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it went really smoothly. It was great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we had 5 bears to do in succession. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, boom, 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 and they're getting everything. They're getting, we're checking their body fat indexes using a body mass indicator machine. They're getting radio collared, GPS collared. They're getting measurements taken. They're looking in their work, getting dental work done if they need it. So we removed a few milk teeth or deciduous teeth that were stuck when the canines are coming through. So those kind of things. And then they're going into culverts, and then we're transporting them.
Yeah.
And it is
saw them there in the culvert, right? They're blindfolded while you're working on them. We're monitoring their heart rate, and they're put in the culvert with lots of hay and stuff to keep them comfortable for this journey. And they're still mildly sedated, right, at this point?
When they go into the culvert, so when I finish my processing, then we put them into the culvert. So yeah, they're still, they're coming out of it. At that point, they're starting to come out of it, but then they go in there and the straw goes in and to cool them if they need ice blocks, that kind of thing. You know, they get water on the way, that
Fruit, yeah.
Fruit, yeah, very fruit with lots of water, like.
And then how long is this journey from Smithers to Bella Coola?
Well, it was easier last year for Max and Moritz, let me tell you, when we were just going to Terrace, but to Bella Coola, boy, oh boy, you got to go all the way back through through Prince George, all the way down through Williams Lake, and then all the way down to Bella Coola. So in all honesty, that, you know, and you're towing, like we've got 3 vehicles, and in it, one bear's in the bed.
This is a drone shot of one of the.
Yeah, so you can see one bear's in the bed of the truck, and then we're pulling a bear in the culvert, right? So 2 trucks have that, and then there's a truck in the bed, another bear in the bed, because we have 5 going. And that trip was, I think, 16.5 hours. We left at 6 a.m. and arrived at 10:30 p.m. And at that point, we still had the bears with us. So, you know, these wonderful people, Angelica and Tanya, our daughter, take the bears and bring them to basically what we call the staging location, where they're locked in overnight, and they need to be fed and make sure they're cool and everything before the next day, which is release day.
Yeah, which we're looking at a photo here is, you know, close to their system, about a half an hour from where they're going to be released, and a shot of the helicopter lifting them. So just like, must be like so many moving parts, so many people. Here's a shot of you in the helicopter. And so you got to visit the locations where they'll actually be released, that the New Hawk Nation helped us identify within their traditional territory. And we looked at these systems. So maybe you can tell us about why we chose these places.
Okay, yeah, it's a 34-minute flight, air time, and we chose them to give them the best chance possible. So my motto for this project, and it has been from the beginning, is that we are setting these bears up for success. I don't know if rewilding works or not, but a number of people, and even in my community and at my level, will tell you that it does not. And a number will say, you know, maybe it does. I don't know. There is no data out there that I've seen that's good enough for me to answer that question. And so what I try to do is set these bears up for success. What that means is I'm going to release them. I wanted to release them as close to the best habitat possible, not necessarily right in it. Unfortunately, landing sites limited that. So we did release them right in it. And yeah, this is a shot. This is Arthur and his sister Raven. And they've just woken up from the immobilization agent. Arthur went over to Raven because he woke up first and sort of made sure she was okay. And she got up and they're licking each other's lips.
Wonderful.
And later, if you ask me about the tracking, I'll tell you what's neat about that too. But you can see the GPS collars on their necks there.
Yeah, so obviously, you know, it's great to see them, you know, get this second chance in the wild and be part of, you know, helping make this kind of work a success. Not only here in British Columbia, but hopefully in other places. Well, how are the bears doing now? We've been monitoring them for weeks now since the release. How are they doing?
I have been super interesting. Boy, oh boy, is the data interesting. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. I put my first radio collar on, I think, in '93, and I've been doing it ever since. And this is just so interesting, the data on it. So basically, what happened is Cedar woke up, and they're as you saw in an estuary complex. So there's water, a great body of water. Cedar woke up and she found the other 3. They were separated a bit because the 2 family groups are going to be separated a bit when they were released. But she actually got up and went over and found Arthur and Mune and Isa and Raven, and met up with them. And then she stayed on the one side of the arm, and she headed south. And she went up all the way along the side of that arm, and she headed way up to the subalpine alpine. The other 3 crossed over. They swam across. And then Isa, I don't know what she did. She headed northeast. And Raven and Arthur, the 2 that are kissing in the last photo, they stayed together. They never split up, by the way, to this day. And they went the other way around that arm, and they went up to the same subalpine alpine, and they met up with Cedar. Like, it was unreal. And so the 3 of them met up there. And this area, I won't tell you what it's called, the habitat, but it's known as some of the best grizzly bear habitat this time of year. And so those three are up there. And then I'm watching Isa thinking, what's she doing? And she's sort of saying northeast and I don't know, looking around and everything. Well, just a couple days ago, probably on I think the 13th, she started to come back down and head back towards kind of where the release site was, where they swam across. And next thing I know, so are the other bears. So they start moving down. And next thing I know, she joins her siblings, and then Cedar joins them, and they're all together. And they're hanging out right across back down there. And now Cedar's gone back up to the Alpine, and the other three are together heading up that way.
That's wonderful. It's wonderful to see them, getting this second chance at life in the wild and working in a beautiful place where they can access sedge grass and berries. And that's really proud to be part of this.
Like what Sarah was saying, what bears teach us, these are fair distances. These bears are covering fair distances. And how do they know one went around one side of the lake and the other? Like where's the communication coming in, and how is that happening, and how are they meeting up, and how did they go back and find Isa, and the smelling and the sensory of them? So right. I think they still have a lot to teach us.
Yeah, that's true. And there's some great photos there, and I just wanted to thank some of them were John Marriott, he was there, Taylor Green, our staff member, was there helping you also as an assistant. She was in one of the photos. And then Nick Quenville was also there taking photos. So really appreciate that. It's really great. I really appreciate your time today, Lana, and being part of our team, being so professional and caring so much for these bears, and bringing this work from the government, the COS, and the Northern Lights Wildlife Center together so that we can improve the lives of grizzly bears everywhere. It's really great to work with you.
Thank you, and thank you so much for funding this work. It's really appreciated. I think that we're going to have implications on a global scale for grizzly bears.
Wonderful. Thanks for your time, Lana.
Thank you.
Well, it's great to hear an update on that exciting project, and to talk with Lana. And we're almost wrapping up here. So I've got one last exciting piece of news, and we're going to welcome, just before we wrap up the evening here, we've got someone else joining us, and Richard Sparrow, who's going to be joining in a second. And thanks to the support of the Vancouver Foundation and the Adain Foundation, we've been able to create a new full-time position here at the Grizzly Bear Foundation. And I'd like to introduce Richard Sparrow, our first Director of Indigenous-led Conservation. How's it going, Rich?
Doing well, thanks. Thank you, Nick. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're so excited that you could be here tonight. This is the first time we're kind of announcing it publicly. You've been working with us for 2 years, facilitating and leading our Indigenous Roundtable process. But now it's official. We're going to be working with you full time, and we're so excited about all that you can accomplish. But one of the first things we'd like to talk a little bit about is like who are you? What's your background? I know you very well, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Thanks so much, Nick. Really appreciate this opportunity. As mentioned, my name is Richard Sparrow. I'm a member and a counselor of the Musqueam First Nation. Musqueam is located in the heart of Vancouver, British Columbia, and it's a true honor to be here tonight to share a little bit about myself, and I look forward to sharing a lot more in the near future with each and every one of you. I would really like to express my appreciation to yourself and to all the staff and the team that put this together. I've had the opportunity of listening in for the whole evening tonight, and I'm just absolutely blown away with the coordination and the professionalism, and most of all, being able to hear the stories from the other panelists throughout the evening today. I learned a tremendous amount, and it's making me really excited to learn a little bit more about the Grizzly, and it's as I mentioned, it's a true honor. I wanted to also acknowledge Alec Dan for his welcome to start us off in a good way, and really wanted to send my appreciation to Alec Dan for that. Also, as I mentioned, really wanted to acknowledge each of the panelists. They did an amazing job. And as I mentioned, I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about some of the initiatives and projects that you're working on.
Great. Well,
I myself, I've been dedicated.
Just so everyone knows, this is also bedtime, right? So you've got 2 young boys. I think we're really, did they go to bed already or are they up?
They're still here. I can hear them, so they might run in. So just to forewarn you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Rich, it's also maybe you could tell people why you're really excited about this opportunity for Grizzly and what it means for grizzly bear conservation.
I've dedicated my whole life and towards conservation and rebuilding initiatives. My primary focus has been on salmon here in British Columbia. And it's been a true, a great experience in having conversations with you and others with the Grizzly Bear Foundation, really understanding how all these various species really interconnect with one another. So it was a great opportunity for me to learn a little bit more about how this keystone species is really going to be a true focus of our conversations moving forward, and how if we focus in on the grizzly, how it will trickle down and have a true positive impact on all the species that it relies on, the vegetation it relies on, the land it relies on, the water systems it relies on. So I think that for myself, I'm really excited to work with the grizzly and try to really promote and enhance and protect the grizzly moving forward, so that there will be a trickle down positive impact to all that it depends on.
Yeah, I'm excited to working with you as well, Rich. Full time. We're going to do some pretty exciting stuff this year. And again, thanks to the Vancouver Foundation and the Adain Foundation for all their support and insight into this important work. We're going to say goodnight now. Thanks, Rich. I'm going to wrap up the evening. And thanks to everyone who joined this evening and who made a donation. Thanks to our special guests, Sarah, John, Lana, and Richard. I'd like to thank our team who's behind the scenes, and maybe they can jump in here for a second. You can see their faces. I don't know if we have the technical ability. We'll try. Oh, there's Sarah. Hey, Taylor. Nice. And so we've got our team in Vancouver, Whistler, in the Kootenays, and John, our board in Alberta, and Lana on the island. So Grizzly Bears roaming, Grizzly Bear Foundation working everywhere Grizzly Bears roam. And so tonight, I'd like to close the evening off with a short video. Please watch the credits at the end. There's so many generous people that contributed to these videos and to make tonight possible. And if you can make a donation, please do. Again, we'll be able to double your impact thanks to the Adain Foundation. And we appreciate you being here this evening. Please give for Grizzlies. Thank you, and good night, everyone.
During one of the most impactful global events in recent history, our connection to each other and to the natural world is more important than ever. You can help. You can ensure grizzly bears are never again hunted for their paws, hide, and head. You can give orphaned grizzly bear cubs a second chance at life in the wild. You can support conservation through reconciliation. You can help restore biodiversity. Give for Grizzlies today.